William Bill McIntosh, AM, I'll introduce him first. And I'll just make sure that with Jasmine that we've got Bill's presentation up. Thanks so much. Bill is an experienced natural resource management, economic and community development practitioner. Through his extensive involvement on numerous community boards and committees at state, regional and district level in South Australia, Bill is passionate about his involvement in NRM. Bill is a former member of the Soil Council of South Australia and chaired the council for 8 years, so comes with a lot of experience. In June this year, Bill completed a term of 25 years membership of the Outbacks Areas Community Development Trust, now Outback Communities Authority. His involvement also included 17 years in the position of chair. That's quite a feat. Bill is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and is currently presiding member of the National Parks and Wildlife Council. Bill will be presenting to us on the challenges we face with balancing NRM in these contemporary times. Please welcome Bill.
Thank you, Leanne. First of all, can I just acknowledge important guests, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to say how pleased I was to accept Jerry's invitation to make a short presentation here today. I'm not entirely sure that I'm the best person, given the audience present, to be speaking on this particular topic, but I have been around for a little while, and I do enjoy looking at the big picture aspect of things. One thing I do know is that Landcare is a highly recognised brand in Australia and does capture an idea that will continue to be highly relevant and valuable in our community long after a lot of other things have changed. So in choosing to talk about balancing natural resource management in a changing landscape, I thought I would just make some very general observations about what has changed over the last couple of decades, in my view, and actually using the term landscape in the very broadest sense. So in the next few minutes, just to take that very eclectic helicopter view of what we see around us in the catchments, both positive and negative, and then to suggest a possible scenario that I see could develop and how that might affect people involved in NRM. Incidentally, as a pastoralist, I've always found the term balance to be a very useful term or concept when thinking about natural resource management. In the end, I think it's probably the best, not being pessimistic, but I think it is probably the best we can aim for. And just using a simple mechanical analogy, we all know that any piece of machinery in cyclic motion that's out of balance will eventually encounter difficulties. So looking around in South Australia now, just in our own patch, I think that we'll all agree there are a host of positive changes that now tend to be consolidated. Probably the most general now is that we all aspire to sustainability. We may admit that we don't fully know where it's leading or what the implications are, but the intention is there and the commitment is there, and there is open discussion in place. These days, I think the agricultural sector and the sustainability debate is pretty well depoliticised. But I can tell you this, in my memory, this hasn't always been the same in the past. The second thing that I would comment on is that we basically have stabilised landscapes, I think. Most landscapes have been essentially stabilised with better management, particularly our agricultural landscapes. And travelling down through the mid-north yesterday, it's hard to imagine, and seeing all that fabulous productivity, it's hard to imagine there are any problems out there. Technology and farming efficiency. And we all know there have been rapid advances in machinery and equipment, and we now use a term called precision farming, and to a large extent this has been a driver for change in itself, I think. Combined with other factors such as plant breeding advances, there is no doubt this has been a big contributor to the enhanced productivity and stability we see around us. Risk management. All forms of risk, including climate, are now better understood and increasingly, I think, analysed and factored into decisions. But I guess we can always do better. Just on the wider front, I think it's true to say that sustainability markets are beginning to emerge. Although you'd have to question whether this will hold in the longer term future, as demand for quantity could actually overtake demand for quality. The other big change, I think, in the last 20 years has been communication and access to information. This has probably been the most spectacular recent change, with instant communication and information now tending to be the norm. And I think this has driven a new level of awareness and communication so important in the NRM area. And I think also global issues are becoming more relevant to us all and are almost now commonplace in everyday conversation. To very broadly summarise, there's no doubt been a huge amount of progress and valuable work done by many thousands of people in our community. And as a community, I think we're a lot more open, aware and communicative about sustainability. However, on the negative side of the ledger, there's also no shortage of concerns or contentious issues. Just looking around our own patch again, we'd find people who are concerned about things like latent soil health issues. Despite the flush of productivity, no doubt there are pockets where soil structure and other imbalances are still a concern. Herbicide resilience and or resistance. Many would raise this as an ongoing issue and perhaps a chink in our armour still. Role of GM crops, a technical and contentious issue, and one could ask, will we ever have a conclusive answer on this? Then, of course, there is the ever-present feral animal and weed threat, the increasing cost of conventional controls and the need to maximise biocontrol opportunities. And we would all ask, are we going to be able to keep ahead of the spread and maintain some sort of balance right across the continent? There's also the role and climate value of soil carbon store. In many cases, the jury is still out and subject to verification on this. Water resources allocation, environment uses versus industry needs. Still a lot of heat in this issue, and many would say not resolved yet. Drought preparedness. Are we any better prepared for the next drought than we were for the last? What magnitude of events should we prepare for? And are we actually accepting drought as a natural event? Then there are other escalating issues like unconventional gas extraction and impacts on landscape and water tables. Can we and will we do the science to prove beyond reasonable doubt that it can be done safely? And then we've got another example right on our doorstep in South Australia, mining over prime agricultural land and offsite effects. How on earth can we possibly evaluate 15 years of short-term gain from mineral extraction against 150 years, say, of prime sustainable food production? Then, of course, there are other little issues, just to keep us on our toes. Management of overabundant native species. I think this can be a real dilemma for anyone in a responsible position. There's no real answer to some of these questions. Further down the track, biosecurity. We all know that's a huge catastrophic risk in a world where movements around the globe are increasing and the risk is increasing exponentially. Probably on the administrative front, things like public funding of NRM. Will domestic governments be able to maintain the level of investment we've seen in the past? We all know there are intensely competing pressures from other sectors of budgets in all governments these days. Finally, I think there's the big daddy of them all. Do our food production and natural systems have the resilience to withstand whatever eventual atmospheric temperature that may or may not occur? How can we even begin to answer such a question or prepare in some way? That's just a quick list of very grab bag of issues that I think are now pretty well established in our everyday NRM and rural landscape conversations. I think, as you would all agree, when you look at a list like that, the open-ended questions quickly escalate to an alarming and perhaps intimidating proportions. Moreover, it is not likely to get any simpler in the future, as the tensions between food production, extraction and protection in our landscape ultimately sharpen further as demand for all forms of resources grows. And of course, on the other side, concern for the balance of nature also heightens. Already, I believe, there is the need to start developing and using special decision support tools, such as the powerful landscape futures analysis process of land use planning and evaluation, as proposed by Professor Wayne Meyer at the University of Adelaide. Now, I don't want to sound too gloomy just in closing, but in the face of all the above, I think we need to ask the fundamental question, and that is, are we seeing the beginning of a trend where the issues, variables and objectives in the NRM area are increasing in complexity, along, of course, with all the solutions? Do we need to accept this now and perhaps start preparing for it? If one accepts this idea, we could be about to enter a period where a number of things work in combination. The issues and problems that remain in our landscape get progressively harder. Naturally, we've tackled some of the straightforward things with great results, but there may be a tendency for it to get harder in the future. Answers that we do have increasingly might tend to raise further questions. There may be an increasing reliance on science, which may or may not have been done, may or may not be affordable or conclusive. As a result, there can be much more conjecture and indecision in NRM about what is a sustainable way forward and how this actually relates to things you do on the ground. And to further compound the situation, we cannot always assume that domestic governments are able to match the level of public funds invested in NRM that they have in the past. I think although if it occurred, this too hard scenario would be felt largely at the management level, I think it is reasonable to assume that it could seriously affect the morale of everyone in the NRM community. I believe there is no doubt that the lack of definitive answers and or consensus has the potential to disempower or demotivate people. A form of lethargy or paralysis could result if there was less harmony in the community and we didn't continue to share common understandings on such things as why we draw the line where we do between production and protection, or how we tackle problems in certain ways. Just to close, I think there is no doubt that this would present challenges and perhaps new opportunities for the Landcare movement. Alternatively, of course, if science does provide new tools and decision support frameworks, this could work in a very positive way, energising the community and its networks in those areas. In closing, whatever happens, I believe Landcare will no doubt continue to do what it does so well in building even better relationships, especially city to rural, and driving personal commitment and the mobilisation of people resources to make a difference on the ground. If you believe what I have suggested, it might also help to lead the charge for the critical information, decision support and long-term solutions that we are going to need if we are all going to agree on the right decisions in the ever-increasing complexity of our landscape. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I wish you all the very best for your conference. Thank you.